First of all, very, very welcome. I kind of last Wednesday decided to do this Zoom session with so many women webinars out there. I've always held back to host something, by myself. I, for one, never attend any women's session, so I think this might be different. But then again, I don't know. The only women's event that I attended in my life was something that I was invited to as a spouse of my husband, and that session ended up being all about how to make up. And things like that doesn't really sit well with me. But why it was important for me is there's if you look at all the narratives out there that's attached to all these women's sessions, etc., the narratives doesn't sit well with me personally. It's things like smash through the glass ceiling, how to be a woman in the boardroom. It's things like empower women. So something like, it feels like something that someone needs to do to us. And then I kind of think that, we are now celebrating the march in 1956 on the 9th of August to the Union buildings, where 20,000 women across all races marched together to stand up and petition against the apartheid's permit system, the pass system. That was 26 years after white women in South Africa got voting rights. No one kind of empowered the women across races to go and stand up together. They did it for themselves because they wanted to make a difference. So one of the things that I will share through storytelling is this whole thing that, we are all different. We are all unique. And, through our journeys in a man's world, in my situation, as I will tell in the stories, we can do it for self. We've got different strengths. For me, diversity is extremely important. At any level, diversity is important, and not only gender, but also age, our cultures, and our strengths that we bring. And then we've got so much that we can offer. One of the things that we see a lot in terms of these webinars is, and the stats out there, is women in politics, women in the boardroom, etc. Now, if you just look at South Africa, and so I'm just kind of thinking whether I shouldn't put the meeting password off. But if you look at South Africa, we are 10th in the world in terms of gender diversity on government level. And we've got more women voters than women who actually votes than men. So why in South Africa have we not seen the changes if we've got diversity on that level? If we look at genders in the boardroom, and which has changed significantly since I started my career, and then we still don't see shifts on toxic workplace cultures, etc. So why is that? So one thing for me is I would like to see more diversity in terms of age as well, and a range of other things on board level and functional areas, functional contributions, the strengths that we can contribute, and not just our gender. I would love to see more young people on government as well. It's kind of, especially in South Africa and Africa, some people should have been retired by now, but yet they make decisions. So why is there not any social change? So I thought to do it a little bit differently today, and to do it through storytelling. And that would work well if I do it through photos. So then you don't need to stare at my face the whole time. And it also kind of anchors it with some visuals as well. And it will be reminders for me as to hopefully not forget anything that I do want to share in slide view. So let's start somewhere in, I wish it was the middle, but it's not, where the kind of the career decisions come in. And while I'm kind of sharing the story, one thing that I always tell my children, if I pass on before they make certain choices in their career, there are two things that is key in the decisions that they make in their life. And the one thing is choose their careers wisely, and happiness is all what that is important. Success is a result of choosing the right career and being happy in those career choices that you've made, and nothing in that is irreversible. And the second thing is choose your life partners wisely, because they can enable you or they can hinder you. And I've seen that a lot in some of the women in my life. Unfortunately, not all of them. So as I'm going through my story, I am fully aware that things like the culture that we're born into and the life partners that we choose to marry and things like the support that we have at home has got a big impact. Certainly for me, it was an enabler, but it certainly has a big impact on many women's stories. So what is this slide? So I nearly chose the wrong career. And I enrolled for a certain degree, and a lot of people, when they hear what that is, there's radio silence because they know I would have been terrible at it. And 2 weeks before university started, I kind of eased out of my rebellion, and I went to my father, who is in that photo, and I said to him, I need help. And being in a similar profession, I actually never knew what he did. He was very, very values driven, but he also knew me well enough not to tell me what to do, because I would have rebelled and did something opposite to that. And I changed my career direction 2 weeks before university started, and I haven't looked back. Now, here's something about why parents are so important, because they know us well. And secondly, we cannot rely on schools. I went to my final year of school. I went to the career counselor at school and I asked him, I don't know what to do. And he asked me the question, well, do you want to work with numbers? Or do you like to sit with a book and read in front of a fireplace? And, I don't know, grade 12. I was so tired of school. And I just said to him, no, I prefer to read a book in front of a fireplace. So I nearly studied BA. And then 2 weeks before university started, I decided to do a BCom in HR and industrial psychology. And because I always, and it was a perfect decision for me, as you know, many of you that know me, is the commerce and the people side, and the merge of that is really what got me intrigued. So when I did that photo on the left is when I did my honours degree. And you can see it is strikingly white, and only about a third of women in the class. And the only reason, and we've nicely separated, the women are together and the men are together, and the only reason why I'm there next to the professor is because I was the elected class leader. And most of my friends at university were the men in class, not the women. And at the bottom, I'm there with a few friends. So my life has actually been pretty much surrounded by men from an early age. I had 2 brothers, and many of my friends at high school were boys. And hence also the narrative that really get me when I see it's still happening, that feminism is on the rise. My boys are 19 years old now, but I do hear that there's a lot of talk sometimes of women thinking that they are better than men, which doesn't sit very well with me. And then to the right is the guy who I married, happily married, to, who I've met way too early on in my career. I met him when I was my last year of school, and he was his first year of university. So he met me when and going into how I became very, very career focused, etc. And I wasn't looking for it. I never believed in things like you should be married by this age, etc. While I was studying at university, so in my second year, I started getting involved in a committee, the IPM branch. And my second year, I was the youngest person on a committee of the IPM. And that kind of got me into my profession and networking widely as well. So somewhere while I was studying, I decided, no, I needed to do a project. I'm kind of really getting hungry to do some real work. And I was interviewed for a job not just behind those mountains in an industrial area, ABB, just for a short-term project. And as I was, and that was my first real exposure to, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, where the man that interviewed me said to me, oh, they're not, why should I appoint you for this? Because you're a woman, and if you go to the shop floor where people assemble electronic circuit boards, they're going to just look down your cleavage. And I just stayed with him blankly. And I think that for me is also something that throughout my career, where the occasional hints or things that had happened, I just completely ignored it. It wasn't a setback for me. I just pulled through, and I think it was a little bit off to prove people that they are wrong. And then I worked for Samba head office. So I was approached for that position. So by now I kind of had a very good network, by a man, to work for a man, to replace a man who was put on early retirement so that I can go in and do some changes. I've had no work experience other than that 1 month project that I was doing. And on my first day, I was working in the same floor as a lot of women who were in payroll and HR admin. And they came up to me and asked me what dress size should they put up for me for the office dress. Because in those days, in the banking industry, women wore office wear, not men. Okay, women. And that for me was, it was my first day. I literally broke down in tears. I phoned my father. I said to him, is it okay to resign on the first day? And, he took me out of it. He said, no, why don't you go to your boss? And I said, well, can I? And he said, absolutely. So I tried to kind of get rid of my red eyes, and I went to my boss and I said, well, when the GM of HR approached me for taking on this job, and I asked him about office wear. He said, you don't need to. And so my boss said to me, reported to him, and he said to me, well, change the policy, change the clothing policy, which I then did within 24 hours. And that made me very, very unpopular with the women on the floor. They ganged up against me because I thought I'm better than them, because they still had to wear office wear. But the new policy said professional women didn't have to. And not my first time, but professionally my first time, how I realized how bitchy women can be if they are a majority of women there in the workplace. So we always said that, we wanted to first finish studying, have our first jobs before we got married. So very, very planned. And while I was still working there in the city centre of Pretoria, I walked into one of my friends that I studied with. And I said, how's it going with Connor? I said, well, Connor's a bursar at Sasol Secunda. he is now there and I need to look for a job there. And he said to me, well, there is a job that he's heard from a recruitment agent, but it's a man-only job. So I phoned the recruitment agents and I said, well, it's only for a man. And I then went through a few back doors and managed to get a door in and to have an interview again with a man. And it was an all-male team. And yes, miraculously, I got the job, whether it was because I was about to get married to an engineer that was a bursar, maybe. But I do remember in my interview that the man that I was working for that interviewed me was still one of the best bosses I've ever had. He was extremely tough. He put me in the deep end. But yeah, I remember him telling me at one stage, what is your weaknesses? What's your strengths and what's your weaknesses? And I very cheekily, and I don't know why, because I was actually quite shy, told him I don't have any weaknesses. It won't work with anyone else, but somehow it worked with him because I think he liked kind of the cheekiness. So yes, here I was actually working just outside that plant, and one of the best teams I worked with in my entire career. It was an all men's group, and we were all assigned to different departments inside the plant. And we did amazing things together. I was thrown in the deep end as the youngest of the group, and within 2 months. So those days when you had that entry level position, it was, I think, a year or 2 years before you could get promoted. And yes, we were at a barbecue, and the next moment we all nearly swallowed up our sausage rolls, and when he said, now I'm promoted. And I do suspect that, he tested me. He gave me something, and he said, the best next thing is the S-curve, is how to need to put something together for the senior leadership team in terms of how to innovate. And how to understand the S-curve. So I've never done something like that, and I did it, and I passed the test, and hence I was promoted. Did I ever then, or later in my career, get less money than men? I actually do not know. I asked myself this question as I was putting these photos together. I dealt with quite a few tough men as well, but then managed to somehow find a workaround and really, connect with them. Because a lot of the work that I had to do was around change, did everything, yes, as well. And somehow also, at some stage in my career, I was asked to put a new department together. My manager asked me to go with him and set the new department up. And then another stage, they were wanting to put in new OD functions in place. And I was asked to go there as well. And there I found how difficult it can be if your boss is driven by ego and he puts you slam bam in the middle, where everyone kind of resists his ego drive, and then you just have to navigate around that. What else can I tell you here? And yes, and then I was asked to set up a new department. So by now I'm kind of have discovered that I really like to do a lot of different things. I knew by now that I really want to build my pillar of expertise in organizational development, change and leadership, and have a very good foundation to do that. I also kind of knew by now that I like to throw new stuff out and put new stuff in, whether it's departments or just systems and policies and procedures. And then, yes, somewhere in that time, yes, that's me and hubby. We got married, and by the way, so the moment that I got a job there, we arranged our wedding in 4 months. We normally tell people that. I think it was a quick had to get married. And then we knew we wanted to come back to Johannesburg. We never liked, the flat cold of Secunda, where everything was about work. I was working very hard. I was also suffering from yuppie flu, ME. and had tremendous support from my husband. And between wedding arrangements, I also completed my master's degree with all of that. And he was just always, and he continues to be a major support for me in my career. And just me in general. So then I went to Sasol Limited as they got a new group HR executive. He wanted to do a lot of changes on the executive level, and I was asked to take on a new role, again replacing a man who was put on early retirement. And yes, I only work for the group executive, who were only men, and work with all the group HR managers and the group executives of all the businesses who were only men. I cannot think in my career where I've really at that stage, women in leadership roles, and I'm really starting to feel old, were not a lot of women then, back then. So in that stage, got a few promotions, and by the way, so for me always, I never worked for promotions. For me, promotions are the end result of doing the right things. And I showed, and will continue to show in my career, that I am able to deliver. You know, when I walk away, which I often did because I didn't stay too long in one company or one division, etc. As long when the moment that I got into doing repetitive, it was ready for me to move on. So, you know, again, I was headhunted, and I knew that I could ask for a promotion, and got one, but their policies were so restricted they couldn't give me what I could get outside. And the other thing that I were at a crossroads here was that I actually wanted to move out of HR. So the group HR executive actually put me in touch with one of the executives there to move me into the commercial department. And as that conversation was about to happen, I was headhunted for my next role. And, you know, sometimes I think back, what if? But I'm very, very happy, you know, with the choices and where it ended up, where it led me after that. So next stop, again, male-dominated industry, De Beers Industrial Diamond Division. So not the shiny ones that we wear on our fingers, but the ones for industrial use. The whole management team were men. Most of the organization were actually men as well. But again, did a lot of interesting things there in my career as well. And I think, you know, how do you influence as well on that level? And yeah, so it was a very, very secretive industry, which didn't, again, I think sat very nicely with me. And another crossroads. So as I was working there, I had to take a very, very difficult decision to take on someone that was much more senior than I was. But as the HR manager, and things that he did that impacted mostly women, was something that I just couldn't sleep at night, not doing anything about it. So my decision ended up that I knew that I couldn't stay there for much longer, and in any way I thought, you know, it might be time to move closer to home if I am to have children at some stage. So already by now, most of my friends had children, and I was still very, very career focused, very, very happy with what I was doing. And yes, then I went and again asked to be group HR manager for this company at the height of Y2K, reporting to a man, who reported to the CEO as a man, and the whole board of directors were men, except for one woman, and she and I remain close friends to this day. She's never been married, never had children, and is a CFO of a well-known company. And yes, and this is probably one of the biggest crossroads. So I kind of was starting to think about children because like I said, most of my friends had children. All of them said to me, I'm going to be grey haired by the time my children goes to high school. My mother was on her way to steal all my friends' children, she said to me. And while we were actually traveling, Con and I, overseas on a trip, and we were in Scotland, my PA sent me SMS and said, can she pack my boxes? The company who has just the week before been the share to buy just folded, and it was the second IT company that folded. Now, when something like that happens, it's amazing what goes through your mind. So here I was in Edinburgh, booked for that night in a very expensive castle with my card, and you hear that you won't have a job when you go back. Now, for someone who's built their whole identity around their work and around their career, that fear goes and sits somewhere. It's somewhere here in your chest or your throat. And I remember that, the first thing that I did from very expensive phone calls is to tap into my network. So even then I had a very good network outside of the companies also that I was working, because that was more logical to go back to corporate. And, and I thought, you know what, maybe it is the right time. Doors close so that others can open, and maybe it is the right time for me to start thinking about having children. And so, Con always asked me, it's my decision when. He would not prescribe for me when I'm ready, because it's my body, it's my career and all of that. And yes, so as I came back to South Africa, I actually had two options. The one was to start within a big financial institution, start a new department. It was outside of HR. It's the head of driving that business, building it. And the other one was HR for a vehicle company. Also international company, and I decided it's maybe time to start my own thing. I knew by now that you can throw anything at me. I knew I had a good network. I knew that I had credibility in the companies that I worked at, and I also knew that I liked business. And it was not only for me about doing this stuff, but also how do you build a successful business. I've had a lot of consultants that I knew, all men at that stage, very, very few females that I think, looking back, did what I did. And I also knew that a lot of consultants didn't have the corporate experience in so many different things that I had. I also knew that a lot of consultants just wanted to do the work and weren't really interested at all in terms of the business side of things. And there's a lot, it's the easy part is registering the business, but there's a lot of other things that happens with that. So I registered Human Capital Business Solutions and it was registered a month before my twins were born. That first year of before they were 1 year old, so that first year, because I was breastfeeding, kind of, I still wanted to get this up and running. I did the company, I did the logo myself, and had someone just do it, although it looks very dated now. And I had this whole plan of what I was going to do. And one of the consultants that I soundboarded on, service offering said to me, as a consultant and as a business, you only need to focus on one thing. And, most consultants just do one thing. They either do just assessments or they just do M&As or whatever. And I knew that wasn't me. And I'm very, very happy I stuck with that, because throughout my career I did a lot of different things, and sometimes not even what was in that wheel for the first couple of years. That's why I don't even have the wheel, that whole model anyway there. Just taking a quick rewind back. So before I established, as I was about to establish Human Capital Business Solutions, so by now I was pregnant. I was already doing a project before I founded that, at an insurance industry. Very nauseous going there in a building that people smoked because it belonged to British American Tobacco. And I was approached by a change and coaching company that wanted to invest in my company in return for shares. And I had a friend that actually, a husband of a friend that looked over the contracts for me. He was, he knew about M&As and shares and deal structuring, etc. And he said to me, and his wife left her corporate career to become a mother. And he said to me, how are you going to do this if you are pregnant? I mean, if they have shares, they're going to have very, very high expectations of you, and you don't know what it is to be a mother and career woman. And I thought, no, well, I really kind of struggled to let go of where my identity was so attached to working, to kind of think that I cannot do it. But the big thing for me was when I was about to sign the contract, as I went to another consultant who I didn't know and who didn't know me, and I asked him what he thought. And he looked at me and he said to me, the only reason why you would want to do this is if you didn't have guts to do it by yourself. Well, I tore up the contract that was in my passenger seat before I got home. So here's my boys. I look very fresh there, but I can promise you I was not. I thought that I was very, very well prepared. At one stage of the pregnancy, I said to my husband, I said to me, gosh, I don't know if I'm prepared. And he said, well, there's good reason why pregnancy lasts 9 months. It's to prepare yourself. So I had serious sleep deprivation. I waited until they were 1 year old before I actually started consulting. And I was fortunate enough to be very, very quickly get a project just for a board of directors. Another consultant brought me in, and they liked what I saw because it was easy and demonstrated that I understood business. And they asked me to do the rest of the organization. And yes, I think, at one stage I said, no, I can train your people to do it. And I said, no, they wanted, me to do that. And the nice thing was it was a growing business. It was mostly men. It was Pebble Bed Nuclear Reactor, which is a government-funded project at that stage, and they were growing. So the key juggle at that stage is how do you get new work in if you have a project. So in between all of this, and this is one of the roles that I think, and maybe I'm just speaking for me, that we often neglect. I always said that I will not have children just because other people say that's the logical next step. But I want to have children to have it. And one of my biggest projects is to make sure that they are okay, because they are our future leaders. Many people asked me when they heard that it's 2 boys, and by the way, I was hysterical. I mean, from the decision to be pregnant until I got was 3 months, and I went to kind of ask them, how many children do you want? They said 2. And I said, okay, well, then 2 it is, and then it was twins. So when I went for my blood test, I was so hysterical just learning that it's twins that my pregnancy test, they thought it was a test. Okay, sorry, so someone is not muted. Okay, so one of the things was to check. So I was already working a lot from home. So where a lot of people are currently struggling kind of with COVID, you know, I understand how it is to have children at home and them often not understanding that, you know, mommy is working. One of the big things when they were small is I would wake up very, very early in the morning, and then if they were to wake up too early, is it would put me completely off guard. Yes, I struggled from postnasal depression, but they only realized that when because I never went for help by the time they were 1 year old, and it was mostly because of absolutely sleep deprivation. So then, what happened? Another crossroads. So I was busy on my way scouting for team building facilities in the beautiful Magaliesbergs when Con phoned me and said they asked him to go to Qatar for 3 years. And, you know, just again, a pause button here. So by then I was mostly a single mom because he was traveling the world for Cecil. And he was, you know, when he was in South Africa, he was barely there because he worked with international companies. So he worked late at night and early in the mornings with the time differences, and the rest of the time he was literally traveling most of the time. So when I asked him, you know, he was very concerned about, you know, how I would take it because I was building the business. I was at the brink of deciding, you know, am I going to get more people to kind of consult with me? And by the way, but then I've also realized that people don't get your company brand necessarily in unless, you know, you pick like the PwCs and the Deloittes. They get Liezel in. So it's sometimes difficult if you grow a business is do you do it if they still just want to get you in. You know, I had to sometimes get another consultant in if I was running projects simultaneously, and they would ask me, but, you know, can you not do it? And there are the little boys. They were very, very excited. The one was very, very apprehensive of going, and I had to kind of check in with him to make sure that he was okay with going. And many people asked Con, is he not concerned of how I will take it? Being so career orientated, growing my business, you know, having, you know, kind of awareness of who I am here is to kind of go to a completely different country and start afresh. And it was, in some respect, it was a detour, but in a lot of respects, it was starting afresh. And I love change and I love diversity. So I said yes. We did go through a Kepner-Treger decision-making exercise together to take the emotions out of the decision. And then landed that we would want to go. We set off thinking that it was going to be 3 years, and said that, you know, we are going to use this time to travel in those 3 years. And it was great because I didn't have a permanent position. He had lots of leave that accrued because he could never take leave. And you know, by then we've traveled a few countries, me and him, always exploring, backpacking, going off the beaten track. So we found our travel back in our first wedding anniversary. So we just continued that and gave the children amazing experiences together. So here is what Con thought that I was going to do. For one. That's not, this photo is taken somewhere towards the end, that a friend of mine who also left corporate, Dutch friend in Qatar, we said, no, we just need to do this once. And we booked the whole day off to do that. And within 3 hours, we were both rushing off to meetings. I thought, you know, but tick list, we've done it. We can now move on. I've met some amazing people there. So the first thing that happens as a priority is to settle your children in. And by the way, when we went for that expat preparation program, my profile for expat readiness was even higher than Kant's. I had all the strings kind of in me to, go to a completely different environment, make sure that everything is kind of settled, handle it as a project, and ready to move on. And by the way, expatriation is much easier than repatriating to your home country. So from deciding things have got different names to deciding where do you go for haircuts. The story of the vehicles in the middle is the story of one day after we arrived, Con gave me the keys and said, go and drive. Now, everyone that's drove in the Middle East, it's worse than South Africa. And women are petrified. I've later learned many women were completely surprised when they learned that I started driving on the first day, as many of them didn't do it after the first year. And we're talking about women across the globe. The other thing we also said is that we're not going to meet fellow South Africans. Why would we want to go to a different country? But many of the South African women that I met there liked to be with other South African women who were like them. Most of my friends were from all over the world. And for the first time in my life, I had more female friends than male friends. And many of them reinventing their careers. It was an amazing place to start afresh. I had a friend who was a cost engineer who worked on the Eurostar, who went after his first expat assignment, became a librarian. And the third country as well, I had a woman who was a corporate lawyer in a big legal firm that started her own business in Qatar, and she's actually now starting a third one, doing a spa in Spain. I had my neighbor was someone that she was a CA working for a large accounting firm. That while she was there, she started doing journalism for a well-known magazine there. Ended up interviewing Gordon Ramsay and who else knows, and at the time of her life. So there were a lot of women that reinvented their careers in that stage. There were a lot of women also that didn't. And what I can tell, what my experience were, is that children are as happy as their mothers were. There were a lot of unhappy women, and you could definitely see it from their children. So the story on the left was the haircut, as a lot of the South African women wanted to, you could see on the Facebook group, wanted to know who can, South Africans in Qatar that can cut their hair. I mean, I had amazing hairdressers. I had hairdressers from the Philippines and Syria and Estonia, etc. One of the things that I did do in this stage was fight my battle with cooking. Taught the boys that there's no gender roles in cooking. We had cook-offs where they had to learn to cook. They had to make their own cakes as well, because I always had intent, because that's what my mother do, bake birthday cakes, and every time before their birthday I would land a new project. And since they were 5 years old, they made their own cakes. And I can tell you now, much more fun, much more beautiful than purchased made-to-order birthday cakes. And there's the lady in our room. Why this is important, the photo on the right of the car, we had amazing conversations in cars. And for me, this is something important about motherhood. Well, parenthood in general, is that it is about the quality of time that you spend together and not the quantity. So within all of this in juggling, we continue, they are first-year university students now, we continue to have amazing conversations in the car. Sometimes still after I stop here at the house, we still have conversations in the car. And it was in a moment like this, when they were sitting at the back seat, when I asked them, I'm going to return to do work more. How do you feel about it? That Marcel said to me, he's kind of impressed. and he respected me for that. And Armand said to me, he kind of thinks it's super cool. And that's one of my proud mommy moments, because I think, you know, as we raise boys to men, if they are respecting women, that they are not only mothers, but they are very self-empowered individuals that can juggle both roles equally. That's something really magically that happens. So I was ready to work. Not long, it didn't take long. As someone said to Khan when we were still in South Africa, don't worry about Liezel, she will not sit still for long, and I didn't. It started with what was supposed to be a women's marathon. I met someone through a mutual friend and discovered that she was just about to leave her corporate role as Group HR Manager of HSBC Bank. And that opened doors for me into my professional network. I got involved in the Qatar professional network there, did a few things for them every year, mentorship, because I could. I was also on the committee of the South African Business Women's Association. And here in the Rot, I was asked to form part of a Qatar debate team with a topic of glass ceilings. So if you know how a debate works, you're on two opposing sides. So I had to debate for the side that believes that the glass ceiling does exist, whereas I actually don't believe it exists. I think it believes it exists until you break through it. I think it's self-imposed glass ceiling. I do believe that if you look and see that there are glass ceilings, then it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. There are exceptions, but that's what I believe in. And if I were to have a daughter, which I don't, although I've got two adopted daughters, or I'm the adopted mum, if I were to have a daughter, I would raise them to believe that the glass ceiling do not exist at all. I also, through this professional network, I started getting involved in projects. Now, why this is important? So I did a project with the Qatar Olympic Committee, and when I started this project, I realized they actually were not happy with an Arabic man that delivered the project, and I was very surprised that as a woman, they would, because I work with executives and all but one women. And, you know, I was intrigued. I learned so much about the culture. I learned so much about paradigms that people had about men from the Middle East, or specifically Muslim men in thobes. And, you know, they treated me exceptionally well. I had I treated to coffee when I arrived, and it was just absolutely amazing. And then, you know, one of the other significant projects that I had was coaching. I was part of a coaching team, or the lead coach for a group of executives, mostly men. And there were one or two women. And one of the Qatari men then discovered in the coaching process that I know a little bit about strategy and marketing. And then after the coaching project, he actually asked me to do a marketing strategy for the company. And then one of the female Qataris, who also worked in the marketing department, who are also coached, asked me to do another part of the strategy for them. And hence, in an environment where people believe that Qatari men would not listen to women, which is absolutely not true at all, it gave me a tremendous opportunity to then share that, breaking those or shifting those paradigms to others. But I also got to meet a phenomenal woman. One of my coaches, in an environment where, as a Qatari female, you are expected to kind of marry whatever. She got divorced. She was a single mother, and she was an executive and being completely career driven. And we still have contact, as I do with my Qatari mentee, who is a professional in marketing in another organization, who decided never to get married. And then in between, I also did a few other things. I was asked to participate in a United Nations Human Rights, International Human Rights Day art exhibition, and there's two of my paintings there on the left. By the way, I started painting when my children were 1 year old, just to get some balance in my life. One thing that I also want to say, one of my friend's daughter, her mother asked her one day, what do you want to be one day? She said, no, she wants to be an artist like Liezel. And she said, you know what, you can have both. Liezel's actually not an artist, she just does it for a hobby. And I started a reduce recycling group in Qatar, and I also started getting involved in the school then. And sorry, yeah, by the way, I decided to get participate in the student advisory board, because so many of the women not having anything to do couldn't stop complaining. You know, they were coming from all places in the world, 67 nationalities, but it was clearly, you know, what women didn't have anything to do. And I thought, you know, let me be part of the solution. Got invited to this very nice 7-star meal with the Duke of Edinburgh as a host in the process. Just very mindful of the time. Yes, just some stories of where in situations I found myself in where there's no women. And which often cringed my family that you cannot go there because only men are allowed, where I think, okay, well, try me. And I've had amazing conversations with men in Miami and Doha and there in Qatar as well in a tented camp. This story, on my bottom line, it is about fear. So up until more or less that time, I always knew that I had a fear of failure. That's not the only fear I had. And it's the fear of heights as well. But what happens? What experiences do you miss if you are afraid? So for me, I've really got a fear of heights. My palms sweat. But I was very mindful, or determined rather, that my children will never see my fear. So Con always had to keep them occupied. Because I had the kind of a do-it approach. I would just go on the Eiffel Tower or in Belgium on a ski slab or a roller coaster, and then while I'm there I think, oops, I've got a fear of heights, so what now? And the fact in the middle, the bottom, it's at Ski Dubai, where we got stuck on that cart that takes you to the slope. And the children could see that I was afraid, and I don't know, I must have said something. And they turned around to me and they said, but mommy, you always said that fear is your worst enemy. So I thought, okay, something landed, and now I have to kind of practice what I preach. And I had some very nice conversations. This photo is, we were on Mount Etna there, which is an active volcano. The penny dropping moment for me there was that the children were picking up volcanic rock and telling me, this is magnesium, this is whatever, this is this and this is that. And I thought they learned it at school, and then I discovered they learned it on a technology game, Minecraft. Why this is important for me is that I fought this battle of kids doing everything on electronics and being in front of their computers the whole time. And rather than seeing it after that an enemy, I started being curious about what they were actually learning, and not just seeing, technology and games as an enemy. So by now we had quite a few changes. So we were supposed to go for 3 years, and it was extended with 6 months, 1 year, and last 2 months. And I was ready to establish a branch in the Middle East. This is Dubai, by the way. I was there to launch one of my products. And one of the things that I went there to do is one of my products, which I decided was going to be my transportable career. Because it runs online, I was fully aware that I don't know where we're going next and when we're ever going to move. What was nice at that stage, the Qatar Financial Centre was willing that I can establish a branch there without 51% shareholders. because of the stuff that I was doing was very, very much aligned to developing the country as well. And there is me and Lita. So one of the last things I did was to sort her out. She was a domestic for most of her life, had tremendous potential, and I tried to open doors and build her confidence and managed to get her to a cleaning job, which was predominantly male by that stage, and they were actually looking for an female, and she could speak Arabic. And there we are back, settling in, coming back. Like I said, repatriation was more difficult than expatriation. Discovered my boys struggled deeply in South Africa because, although it is diverse, it's very different. It's very much like, boy, if you're white and you boys, you do things like this, and that they were not raised like that at all. And yes, also something that I've discovered through these schools is that majority of any form is never good. They've been in a Pretoria Chinese school, which was so diverse, and the school in Qatar, which was so diverse. And when there's that level of diversity, it's as if people and children just don't judge that much, and there's not much bullying going on. So back to establishing the business and growing it. And I'm very, very mindful that I am over my time now. So if you're willing to kind of, just as I'm rushing through, just a couple of more slides. A few things that I've learned in terms of business is people romanticize. I've seen it in Qatar, I've seen it in South Africa, I see it with the students that I talk to annually, is that if they hear that you're a business owner, they think, wow, you're your own boss, but it's hard work. I said to a friend recently, he says, but you work too hard. And I said, but it's very, very nice. You go for a job interview once, you get it, and then you stay with that company for a long time. I have to kind of do a lot of that. And it's not just about doing it, it's building it. It's about, I once had to take another company to the company's tribunal because they used my company name and its trademarks, and there's a lot of other things also involved. And that's why I said, my why, I know why I'm doing it. And but sometimes it might be better, if that's not you, it might be better to collaborate with other people. And I think, the time is right now as well to say that, you don't always, you can collaborate and still have the flexibility that you would like to have. One of the things coming back to South Africa, kind of working, it was the intent to grow the coaching part, and I loved what Tinus brought to me, and they wanted me to become the CEO of People Equate in Southern Africa, and I said, well, there's no way I'm going to run and grow two businesses, and it is a very, very nice fit. But before I signed the contracts in terms of the partnership agreements with People Equity, I went through this stuff, and 2 years ago there was a major penny drop for me. As I was in Minneapolis, someone looked over my shoulder and saw my strengths and said, do you know that only 2% of women globally has 2 of your top 5 strengths as their key strengths? And that kind of penny dropped for me, because I always knew that my gender didn't define, who I am and the contribution that I can make in this world. And I also kind of learned that in terms of purpose alignment, that we've got 3 purposes, our job, our relationship, and the situation. And while my strength might have been perfect in my career, it was, sometimes I was just too much for my children, etc., as to achieve and tick, move on kind of thing. And especially influencing, women globally are very, very low. Just have a look at this in terms of influencing skills. This is the graph of global males and females. There's a big lack of influencing domain strengths, and which is my primary domain. And women are very, very strong in relationship building. And for me, this is the diversity that we need. on all levels of leadership, including in our families, is to kind of really know what all of these domains bring, and that we need all of that. We need more. If you look at things like influencing skills, you really need to go into the blind spot before we start seeing influencing skills in women. So yes, I think one of the other messages that I know my most important role as a mother was to see that the children kind of chose the careers that will make them happy, and they did. If I look back at their lives, yes, the guy that wanted to study medicine did. The guy that liked to take things apart and build things did study engineering. And that they are okay, because that for me is my major role. I mean, I cannot look so much after other people's children, grown-up children, and not look after my own children, because they are the future generation that will want to make a difference, and just to make sure that they choose careers they will be happy with. That's it for me. And sorry for running over time. I do not tend to plan things like this and overplan it, which then I often don't know how long it will take. I'm more than happy to take questions if there are any. Anyone. And I fully kind of understand, that is my story. Very different. We're all sitting with very, very different realities. We're sitting with different phases of our lives. I can certainly say that, given my journey, I've been much more prepared to work remotely and virtually, and having a transportable career that helped me during COVID. I also know that some of the things that I always believed in is that if you're not sitting in a corporate role, is that it's always good to have a plan B. And what we often see now, and especially the young people entering, is that they might have more than one career simultaneously. And we do know that they might have quite a few complete career changes. Although when I speak to the university students, they look at me in surprise because they don't see it yet. What I also see with the young people is that obviously they're looking for purpose. Income for them is second to none. But for them it's really to make a difference. The other thing that I forgot to mention that I thought that is worthwhile is if you run your own business, is that it does change things if you are a breadwinner or if you're not. If you have to work or if you want to work. And those are all things, the realities that when we make decisions about whether we are okay not to have a fixed monthly income, which can happen to anyone, those are kind of priorities that we need to consider, because those are the realities of all our differences. Happy to take questions.